The night smelled of rain and iron. The city was quiet in the way only dying places know how to be, choked with secrets, weighed down with ghosts. I never expected my life to unravel on the steps of a church, under the pale light of a flickering street lamp. I had only gone there to clear my head. The old cathedral sat at the edge of town like a relic abandoned by time, its spires stabbing at the heavens, its doors locked but never silent. People whispered it was cursed, that prayers there went unanswered. But I didn't come for prayers. I came because silence was the only companion that never demanded anything from me. My name hardly matters. For most of my life I've been invisible, just another face in the crowd, another girl who worked too hard for too little. But that night, the universe ripped me out of anonymity and hurled me into a world I had no business stepping into. I saw him there. At first, I thought it was just a shadow crumpled on the ground, a trick of the rain pooling dark stains across the stone steps. But then the shadow moved, a shallow, ragged breath tearing through the silence. My stomach knotted. Something primal told me to turn back, to pretend I hadn't seen, to let the night devour him the way it devours so many broken things in this city. But I couldn't. I ran to him. His body was heavy, all muscle and blood, collapsed like a fallen statue. His suit was ruined, dark patches spreading across the fabric where life was spilling out. His face, even twisted in pain, was too sharp, too fierce to belong to an ordinary man. There was power etched into every line of his jaw, authority carved into the furrow of his brow. His hand twitched when I touched him, his skin hot with fever or fury. I couldn't tell which. I didn't know then who he was. I didn't know that the man bleeding at my feet was someone the whole city feared, a man who commanded empires built on silence and loyalty. All I saw was a man dying, and my trembling hands couldn't just let him go. His eyes opened. I've never been stared at like that before. Like he could see the marrow inside my bones. Like he already owned pieces of me I hadn't given. Even half dead, his gaze was fire, dragging me into something dangerous, something I knew would burn me alive. Help me. It wasn't a request. It was a command. His lips barely moved, his voice broken, but those two words carried the weight of an oath. My heart slammed against my ribs. I should have called someone. An ambulance, the police, but my phone was dead. And more than that, some instinct screamed that the police could never touch a man like him. He didn't belong to the world of rules and justice. He belonged to something darker. I hooked my arm under him, gritting my teeth as I tried to lift him. He groaned, the sound tearing through me like a blade. His weight dragged me down, but I refused to let go. Somehow I managed to drag him inside the church, the heavy wooden doors groaning as if the building itself disapproved of what I was doing. The altar candles were still burning, their flames trembling like they knew a storm had just walked in. I laid him on the cold stone floor, my hands slick with his blood. I tore strips from my own jacket to press against the wounds on his side. He hissed, his teeth clenched, his hand shooting up to grip my wrist. His strength shocked me. For a man half dead, he still held me like a vice, as though he was reminding me that death would have to fight harder to claim him. "What's your name?" He rasped, his voice low, guttural, dangerous even in weakness. I swallowed hard. It was absurd, the timing. He was bleeding out, yet he demanded to know who I was, as though names were the currency that could tether him to life. I told him, my voice unsteady. He repeated it, rolling the syllables over his tongue like he was memorizing the sound, engraving it into his bones. His hand finally loosened. His eyes closed again, but his breathing steadied, shallow but stubborn. I sat there, shivering, my heart pounding so violently I thought it might echo through the empty church. Rain hammered against the stained glass windows. Thunder rolled across the heavens, but inside, it was just me and him, the man who had stumbled into my quiet life and detonated it without saying a word, and I didn't even know his name. Still, something in my gut told me I had just crossed a line I could never step back over. Whoever he was, whatever he carried on his shoulders, it was now tangled with me. His blood was on my hands, literally and metaphorically. The church bells tolled midnight, a cruel, hollow sound, and in that moment, I knew my life was no longer mine. The storm raged all night, rattling the stained glass until shards of colored light trembled across his face. I stayed beside him, knees bruised from the cold stone floor, hands sticky with blood that refused to wash away no matter how many times I wiped them on my ruined clothes. My jacket was nothing but strips now, pressed desperately against the wound on his side. He was burning up. Fever wrapped around him like chains, dragging him deeper, trying to drown him. I whispered words I hadn't spoken since I was a child, prayers half remembered, desperate bargains to a god I wasn't sure ever listened. "Don't die," I whispered, though my throat felt raw. "Don't you dare!" His lips moved again, dry and cracked, shaping something I couldn't hear. I leaned closer and his breath brushed against my ear. "No priests," he growled faintly. "No cops, no one. Just you." It was madness. He was delirious, bleeding, commanding me as though he still sat on some invisible throne. Yet, despite the insanity of it, I nodded. I promised. Because the way his eyes burned into mine, demanding, unyielding, made it impossible to do anything else. I searched the church for anything that could help. The sacristy held old wine and water, nothing that could close a wound like his. I tore the altar cloth with shaking hands, wrapping it tight across his body. My fingers slipped over his chest as I worked, feeling the steady, furious drum of his heartbeat. It was the sound of defiance. He wasn't going to let death take him easily. Still, fear gnawed at me. He was losing too much blood. By dawn, he could be gone. At some point, exhaustion pulled me down beside him. My head rested near his shoulder, the warmth of his body seeping into me even as his skin burned with fever. When sleep finally took me, it was shallow, filled with jagged dreams of fire, shadows, and men with knives for smiles. I woke to the sound of movement. His hand was on my wrist again, his grip iron. His eyes were open, clearer now but sharp, dangerous, like blades catching the first light of morning. He studied me the way a predator studies prey, not with hunger, but with calculation, as if weighing my worth, measuring the depth of my spine. "You stayed," he said hoarsely. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. "Of course I stayed. Most wouldn't. You would have died if I left you," I whispered. His lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. It was darker, edged with something that made my stomach twist. Maybe that was the first moment I understood. He wasn't a man people simply stumbled across. He was someone people either ran from or bowed to. "Who are you?" I asked. The question slipped out before I could stop it. His silence stretched. He blinked slowly, then looked up at the cracked ceiling of the church. "No one you should have found," he said finally. His voice was flat, final, but when his gaze dropped back to me, something softened, almost imperceptibly. "And yet, you did." I wanted to demand more. I wanted his name, his story, the truth about why the hell he had collapsed outside this church like some fallen king. But the weight of his stare pressed the words back down my throat. Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. "What do I do now?" His hand tightened on my wrist. He pulled me closer, so close I felt his breath against my cheek, the faint metallic tang of blood still lingering between us. "Now, you keep your mouth shut," he murmured. "You forget what you saw, and if anyone comes looking," his eyes locked on mine, sharp as a blade against the skin. "You never met me." I should have agreed. I should have nodded, promised silence, and walked away, but something in me refused. I pressed my palm against the wound at his side, my hands trembling. "You'd be dead without me. I can't just forget." For a moment his expression flickered. Confusion? Amusement? No, it was something colder. Something that said he wasn't used to being spoken to like that. "You don't understand," he said slowly. "People who find me, people who get this close, they don't just walk away." The words sank like ice into my veins. I pulled back slightly, but his grip caught me again. Firm, unrelenting. He sat up, against every law of injury and logic, towering even when weak, his presence filling the ancient church like it belonged to him. His hair was damp with sweat, his shirt clinging to the carved strength of his frame. Even half-broken, he radiated a kind of power that dared the world to try and kill him. "What's your name again?" he asked. Voice lower now, slower, I told him. His lips curved around it, deliberate, like he was binding me with it. "Good," he whispered. "Then you'll stay alive." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. Not until the heavy thud of footsteps outside shattered the fragile cocoon of silence around us. My blood froze. His eyes darkened instantly, sharp and alert. He moved faster than he should have been able to, pulling me down to the cold floor beside him. "Stay quiet," he hissed. The church doors groaned. Voices spilled in, low, dangerous, speaking words I didn't recognize. Men. At least 3, maybe 4. Their boots struck the stone with the certainty of wolves entering their hunting ground. The man beside me, broken, bleeding, had become someone else entirely in that instant. His breathing slowed, his body coiled, his gaze flicking toward the shadows. "If they find me," he whispered, "they'll kill you first." The world tilted. My stomach lurched, fear roaring in my chest. "Why?" "Because you touched me." My heart slammed against my ribs. I opened my mouth to answer, but he pressed a blood-stained hand against it, silencing me. His eyes burned into mine with a terrifying promise. From that moment on, my life was no longer just tangled with his. It was bound. The footsteps grew closer, and for the first time, I realized whatever storm I dragged into my life on those church steps was only just beginning. The footsteps echoed like a drumbeat of doom against the hollow church walls. My chest tightened with every strike of their boots. They weren't stumbling drunks or wanderers. These men moved with purpose, like predators hunting prey they already knew was bleeding. The man beside me, this stranger who wasn't a stranger at all, shifted with a sharpness that defied his wounds. His hand left my mouth but stayed close, ready to silence me again if I made the smallest mistake. His breath was steady now, even controlled, as if he were dragging his body into obedience through sheer will. The voices grew clearer. A language I didn't know, harsh and clipped, filled the sacred air of the church. The sound carried the weight of violence, as though the words themselves were knives. "They're here for me," he whispered, his voice colder than the stone beneath us. Panic swelled inside me. My body wanted to flee, but my legs felt rooted to the floor. My mind screamed at me to run, to leave him, to let the wolves take their kill. But his hand closed around my wrist again, grounding me in place. "You move, you die," he murmured. The first man appeared at the end of the pews, his silhouette stretching tall against the fractured light from the stained glass. Another followed, then another. 4 shadows stalked into the nave of the church, weapons gleaming faintly in the half-light. They moved like they owned the place, like God had abandoned this house and left it for them to desecrate. The man beside me, my dying stranger, straightened his back against the stone, his presence swelling, stretching, until he seemed to eclipse the entire church. He leaned close to my ear. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens," I wanted to argue. I wanted to scream at him that he could barely stand, that he was insane to think he could shield anyone in his state. But the conviction in his voice stole the words from me. He wasn't asking. He was commanding, and something inside me knew his commands were never meant to be ignored. The intruders split apart, their boots clicking against the marble, circling like wolves. One of them barked a word. Sharp, guttural. The man beside me answered in the same tongue, his tone a blade, deliberate, laced with venom. The air crackled. Tension snapped like stretched wire. Then it happened. The first wolf lunged. His knife caught the light, a flash of steel in the dim sanctuary. But the man I had found, broken, bleeding, moved with a brutality that stole my breath. He twisted aside, caught the attacker's arm, and with a sickening crack, wrenched it in a direction arms aren't meant to bend. The knife clattered to the floor, ringing like a church bell. The sound jolted me to life. My body wanted to scream, but fear clamped my throat shut. Another wolf rushed forward. The man seized the broken knife and drove it forward with a precision that was terrifyingly intimate. The attacker crumpled, blood staining the ancient floor, seeping into the cracks between the stones. My hands shook so hard I dug my nails into my palms just to stay present. My stomach churned at the violence, at how quickly life drained from the man on the ground. But the man beside me, my stranger, my storm, didn't falter. His body was bleeding, trembling, yet he fought like a beast cornered, every strike fueled not just by survival, but by fury. A third wolf caught him with a blow to the ribs. He staggered, blood spattering from his lips, but he didn't fall. His eyes burned brighter, darker, like the pain only fueled him. He lashed out, slamming the man's head against a pew so hard the wood splintered. The last one hesitated. He had seen enough to know what kind of creature he was facing. His eyes darted toward me, just for a moment, and that was his mistake. The man's hand shot out, dragging him down, pinning him to the cold stone. A gun appeared. God knows where he'd hidden it, but suddenly it was pressed under the man's chin. His voice dropped into a growl that vibrated through the air, every word a promise carved in iron. "You should have brought more men." The wolf choked out something desperate, a plea maybe. The gun fired. The sound split the church, deafening, final. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. The only sounds were my ragged breaths and the slow drip of blood against stone. I stared, frozen, at the carnage around us. 4 men, 4 bodies. Their blood smeared across the pews, the altar, staining the house of God like some unholy sacrifice. My hands clutched at my chest, my heart hammering so violently it hurt. He turned to me, his eyes dark and blazing found mine. For a moment, I thought I'd be sick under the weight of that gaze. He wasn't just a man. He was something else, something raw and merciless, forged in violence. "You saved me," he said finally, his voice low, steady, untouched by the carnage. I blinked at him, stunned. Saved him? I looked at the bodies sprawled across the sacred floor, their lifeless eyes staring into eternity. Saved him? He didn't need saving. He was death walking on 2 legs. I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but no words came out. He stepped closer, blood dripping from his side, from his hands, and yet he stood tall, towering, as though even the bullets and blades couldn't drag him down. His hand rose slowly, so slowly I almost flinched, then pressed against my cheek. His palm was warm, sticky with blood. "You're mine now," he murmured. My heart lurched. "What?" His thumb brushed across my skin, leaving a streak of crimson like a mark of ownership. His voice dropped lower, darker. "I owe you a life, mine, and I always repay my debts." I shook my head, finally finding breath. You don't get to choose," he cut me off, his tone final, lethal. "You stepped into my world the moment you touched me, and in my world, debts are repaid." He leaned closer, his breath hot against my ear, his words sinking into my bones like a vow, "and I repay with blood, or with vows." My body trembled. My voice was a whisper. "What are you saying?" He pulled back just enough for me to see his eyes that burned with a truth I wasn't ready to face. "I'm saying you just became my bride." Bride. The word detonated inside my skull like a bomb. It didn't belong in this place of blood and ruin. It didn't belong to me. My lips parted, but nothing came out. My throat was a dry cavern where my scream had died. I stared at him, at the man who had just killed 4 men with the same effort most people use to brush away dust. His hand still lingered near my face, sticky with blood. His eyes were calm now, a terrifying calm that felt more like a verdict than a promise. "No," I whispered. "No, I'm not. You are," he said simply. "Because I said so. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a question. It was a decree." I stumbled back from him, my shoes slipping on the blood-streaked floor. The church felt smaller now, as if the walls had pulled inward, pressing the weight of his words against me. My chest ached with every breath. "You can't just—" "I can," he interrupted. "And I will." He stepped forward, and even wounded he moved like a predator, every line of his body radiating command. His voice softened, but the softness was a blade wrapped in velvet. "You saved my life. You bound yourself to me when you did that. That's how this works." I shook my head violently. "That's not how anything works. You were dying. I couldn't leave you there." "Exactly. And now you belong to me." His words were ice in my veins. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was insane, to push him away, but I couldn't stop staring at the bodies, 4 men gone, snuffed out like candles. And him, this man, still standing, still burning like a star about to collapse. He must have seen the terror in my eyes because his expression shifted just slightly. Not softer, not kinder, just different, like a mask slipping for a heartbeat. "I don't hurt what's mine," he said quietly. I flinched. I didn't want to be his anything, and yet his words carried the weight of an unspoken truth. Whatever world he came from, whatever laws it obeyed, he wasn't lying. The sound of sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, faint but growing. My stomach lurched. "We have to go," he said. "Go where?" "Away from here. Now." He stepped past me, limping slightly, his hand pressed against his wound. He didn't even look at the bodies. He moved like a man who had left 1,000 bodies behind him and would leave 1,000 more. I didn't follow at first. My feet were cemented to the blood-stained floor. He turned, his eyes locking onto mine. "If you stay, you die," he said flatly. The words cracked something in me. I forced my legs to move, stumbling after him. We slipped out through a side door into the cold morning air. Rain still fell, soft and steady now, washing the blood from my hands but not from my memory. The city smelled like wet asphalt and gunpowder. He led me to a car hidden in the shadows of a narrow alley, a sleek black machine that looked like it belonged to another world entirely. He opened the passenger door for me without looking, then slid behind the wheel, his movements efficient despite the pain etched into his face. I climbed in, my heart still slamming against my ribs. The door shut with a heavy click that sounded like a cell door closing. He started the engine. The sound purred low, powerful. I stared at him. His profile was sharp, his jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Blood seeped slowly through the makeshift bandage at his side. He didn't seem to care. "Where are we going?" I asked. My voice barely sounded like mine. "Someplace safe. Safe." The word felt meaningless in his mouth. I pressed myself back against the seat, trying to disappear into it. My brain was spinning, trying to claw its way out of the nightmare. "I'm not your bride," I whispered. His hands tightened on the wheel, but his face stayed unreadable. "In my world, saving a man's life is binding," he said finally. "You crossed a line. There's no going back." I stared at him, shaking my head. "That's insane. That's not real." He flicked his eyes toward me just for a second. In that second, I saw something in them. Not pity, not kindness, but something raw. Something that looked almost like loneliness. "It's as real as the blood on your hands," he said quietly. Silence swallowed the car. I turned to the window, watching the city blur past, gray and wet. My chest ached, my mind screaming at me to run, to escape. But where? He had pulled me into a world I didn't even understand. We drove for what felt like hours. The streets grew narrower, the buildings older, until we reached the edge of the city. The car slowed, then turned down a winding road that led into a forest. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches like claws scraping at the dawn. Finally, we stopped in front of a house that didn't look like a house at all. It was a fortress of black stone and steel gates, hidden from the world by the trees. Cameras perched like birds of prey on the corners of the walls. My stomach dropped. "Get out," he said. I stayed frozen. He opened his door, wincing as he stood. Blood streaked his side, his shirt torn and damp. Yet he still moved with that same quiet authority, as if nothing, not pain, not blood, not me, could shake him. "Get out," he repeated, softer this time. I stepped out of the car on trembling legs. The air here smelled like pine and rain, but underneath it was something else, something metallic, like the memory of gunfire. He led me up the stone steps. The doors opened before he even touched them. Men stood inside, silent, expressionless, their suits immaculate. They didn't look at me. They looked at him, and then bowed their heads slightly. "Boss," one of them murmured. "Boss." The word slammed into me. He wasn't just some man. He wasn't even just a killer. He was something bigger, something that ruled over this darkness like a king. He turned to me, his eyes locking on mine. "Welcome to your new life," he said quietly, and then, for the first time, I realized he wasn't joking. The door swallowed me whole. One moment I stood in the gray morning air outside. The next, I was inside his world, where everything was dark wood and marble, shadow and silence. The entrance hall was vast, stretching upward into a ceiling lost in gloom, chandeliers glinting like cages of light. It wasn't a house, it was a domain. I froze on the threshold. My breath misted faintly in the cool air. The men who had opened the doors were lined along the walls, heads bowed, eyes carefully averted. None of them looked at me. but I felt their awareness like knives pressed lightly against my skin. He walked ahead of me, shoulders squared despite the blood seeping from his side. Every step he took was a command. He didn't limp. He didn't stumble. He moved as though his own pain had no permission to exist. I followed because I had no choice. My shoes squeaked faintly against the polished floor, the sound too loud in the cavernous hall. I tried to keep my hands from shaking. The man at the door, one of his guards, spoke quietly into an earpiece, his eyes flicking up just long enough to glance at me. The look wasn't curiosity. It was calculation. Like he was trying to measure how long I'd last here. My stranger, my storm, didn't slow as he crossed the hall. He gestured briefly to one of the men. "Call Anton. And get a medic. Now." The man disappeared instantly. I swallowed hard. I didn't know who Anton was, but the way the guard moved, fast and silent, told me everything about the weight of his orders. We reached a staircase of black stone. He started to climb it, one hand gripping the banister as though it was the only concession he'd make to weakness. I hesitated at the bottom. He looked back at me. That look, sharp, unyielding, pulled me up the stairs like a leash. At the top, the hall split into two wings. He chose the left without hesitation, leading me down a corridor lined with closed doors. The walls were hung with oil paintings, landscapes, old battles, portraits of men whose eyes followed me like predators in a forest. We stopped at a door at the end. He opened it and stepped aside for me to enter first. The room beyond was nothing like the hall. It was smaller, warmer, its walls lined with bookshelves. A fire burned low in a marble hearth. The scent of leather and smoke filled the air. "Sit," he said. I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, my heart hammering. My hands clenched in my lap until my knuckles whitened. He shut the door behind us, then crossed the room to a cabinet. He poured himself a drink, the dark liquid catching the firelight. When he turned back to me, his face was unreadable again, the predator mask firmly in place. "What's your name?" he asked. I told him again, though my voice trembled. He nodded once. "I'm Gabriel." The name hit me like a strike. Finally a name. Gabriel. Not just the stranger, not just the boss, but the name sounded like an alias, a blade disguised as a whisper. "You're bleeding," I said before I could stop myself. He looked down at his side as if noticing it for the first time. Then he set the drink aside. "The medic will be here soon. Why didn't you go to a hospital?" He tilted his head, his lips curving in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Hospitals don't treat men like me." I swallowed hard. He sat across from me, the firelight dancing across his sharp features. For the first time, I had a moment to really look at him. Dark hair damp from rain, jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes like storms trapped behind glass. Even wounded, he radiated something dangerous, something magnetic. He watched me just as closely. "You're not afraid enough," he said quietly. I flinched. "I am not enough." Not yet. The door opened. A man in a gray suit entered, carrying a black case. The medic. His expression was neutral, his movements efficient as he set the case down and began to work. He didn't ask questions. He didn't even blink at the blood. Gabriel peeled off his ruined shirt without a sound. My breath caught. His chest and shoulders were a map of scars, some thin and pale, others angry and new. The wound at his side was deep but clean. The medic knelt and began stitching it with quick, sure hands. Gabriel's eyes never left mine. "Do you understand what you've done?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "You stepped into my world. That's not something you can undo." I looked away, heat flooding my face. I hadn't meant to step into anything. I hadn't meant for any of this. I just wanted to help, I whispered. His lips curved faintly. "Help. No one helps me. Not without paying a price." The medic finished and packed his case. He gave a brief nod to Gabriel, then left the room without a word. Gabriel stood, slow but steady now, his shirt still off. The firelight turned his scars into shadows, his eyes darker than ever. "You're staying here," he said. "What?" "Here, in this house. Until I decide otherwise." I shot to my feet. "No, I can't. I have a life. You don't anymore." The words sliced through me. He stepped closer, his presence filling the room like thunder. "You saved my life," he said quietly. "That makes you mine, and I protect what's mine." I stared at him, my heart hammering, my pulse roaring in my ears. "This isn't protection," I whispered. "This is a cage." He stopped just inches from me, his eyes burning into mine. Sometimes a cage keeps you alive. We stood there, the fire crackling, the scent of blood and smoke wrapping around us. His eyes flicked to my mouth, then back to my eyes. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just him and me, his breath and mine, the silence between us thick enough to drown in. Then he stepped back, breaking whatever thread had formed between us. "You'll stay in the East Wing," he said flatly. "Anton will show you. Don't leave. Don't talk to anyone." I wanted to scream, to run, to claw at the walls. But my voice was gone. He opened the door and gestured for someone. A man appeared, a tall figure with a shaved head and eyes like steel. "Take her," Gabriel said. "Make sure she understands the rules." I felt Anton's eyes on me, cold and measuring. Gabriel's last words followed me out the door, curling around my throat like a noose. "Welcome to my world." Anton said nothing as we walked. His steps were silent against the marble, but mine echoed like a metronome of fear. He moved like a shadow, no wasted motion, no unnecessary breath, just a weapon shaped into a man. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with heavy doors and muted paintings of forests at night. The air smelled faintly of cedar, and something colder, like iron. Each turn we took felt like a descent, even though we stayed on the same floor. "Where are you taking me?" I asked finally. My voice cracked. Anton didn't look back. "The East Wing, what's there?" "Your room." I slowed. "My room." The words felt foreign, wrong, like being handed a collar. We reached a set of double doors carved with intricate vines. Anton pushed them open, and I stepped inside. The room was bigger than my entire apartment back in the city. A four-poster bed draped in dark silk, a balcony overlooking the endless forest, a fireplace already lit, its flames throwing gold across the polished wood floors. It should have felt luxurious. Instead, it felt like a gilded cage. Anton entered behind me, his presence filling the space like a second shadow. "This is yours now," he said flatly. "You don't leave without permission." I turned on him, my hands curling into fists. "You can't keep me here." He tilted his head slightly, as though I'd said something amusing. "You think this is a choice?" I took a step back, my heart hammering. "I don't belong here." "No one does," Anton said, his voice low. "Not at first." I stared at him, trying to read his expression, but his face was carved from stone. "What is this place?" I whispered. He didn't answer. He only reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black device, a phone. He held it out to me. "What's this?" "For emergencies," he said. "You press this button. I come." I stared at the phone but didn't take it. "What kind of emergencies?" His eyes flicked to mine, cold and unblinking. "The kind that end lives." A shiver ran through me. He set the phone on the nightstand anyway. His voice was a fraction softer when he spoke again. "Eat. Sleep. Stay inside. Those are the rules. What happens if I don't?" He didn't smile. He didn't blink. He simply said, "Don't." Then he turned and left, the door closing behind him with a soft click that echoed louder than any slam. Silence wrapped around me. I stood in the middle of the room, my arms wrapped around myself, staring at the fire like it might burn a hole through the wall and give me a way out. I tried the door. Locked. Of course. I crossed to the balcony and pushed open the glass doors. Cold air rushed in, smelling of rain and pine. The forest stretched endlessly below, a sea of dark green swallowing the horizon. No roads, no lights, no sound of the city, just wilderness. My breath fogged the glass. For a wild second, I thought about climbing down. But the drop was at least 3 stories, and even if I survived it, the forest looked like it could eat me alive. I stepped back inside, my hands shaking. The fire crackled softly. The room was too warm, too still. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window, a pale girl with wide eyes and blood still under her fingernails. I didn't recognize her. I sank onto the bed, clutching my knees to my chest. My mind spun like a wheel stuck in mud. Bride. Gabriel had called me his bride. Not lover, not prisoner. Bride. Like some medieval vow he'd carved out of blood. I buried my face in my arms. My body trembled. My throat ached. I wanted to scream until my lungs tore, but nothing came out. The door opened again. I jolted upright. A woman stood in the doorway, tall and poised, wearing black like a shadow. Her hair was sleek, her eyes sharp. She carried a tray of food, bread, soup, a glass of water, and set it on the table without a word. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She glanced at me briefly, then back at the tray. "Someone who works here. What is this place?" Her lips twitched, almost a smile but not quite. "A sanctuary," she said. "For some, a grave for others." My stomach lurched. She straightened. "Eat. You'll need your strength." I didn't move. "I'm not hungry." Her eyes flicked to mine. "Around here, hunger is a weakness. Don't show it." Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. I stared at the tray. The soup steamed faintly, smelling of herbs and something richer underneath. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to pick up the spoon. My hands shook so badly the broth sloshed over the edge. I ate slowly, each bite heavy and tasteless. Hours passed. The fire burned low. The forest outside deepened into night. Shadows stretched across the floor, long and crooked. Then a sound broke the silence. A soft knock at the door. I froze. The door opened without waiting for permission. Gabriel stepped inside. He'd changed. Clean shirt, dark trousers, his hair damp from a shower. The wound at his side was bandaged, but he moved with the same predatory grace, his presence filling the room instantly. He closed the door behind him. "You're awake," he said. I stood, my hands clenched at my sides. "Of course I'm awake." He stepped closer, his eyes scanning my face, my posture, as though reading me like a map. "You're safe here," he said softly. I laughed, the sound harsh and brittle. "Safe? This is a prison." He tilted his head, his expression unreadable. "You think the world out there would have kept you safer after what happened?" I glared at him. "You dragged me into this." "No," he said quietly. "You dragged yourself in when you touched me." I wanted to scream at him, to strike him, but my body betrayed me. I stood frozen, trembling, caught between fury and fear. His eyes softened. "Just a fraction. I don't hurt what's mine," he murmured. I stepped back, my heart hammering. "Don't call me that." His lips curved faintly, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're already marked." He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. The touch was gentle, but it felt like a brand. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow you'll see what being mine really means." Then he turned and left, the door closing softly behind him. I stood alone in the room, my breath ragged, my heart pounding. The fire flickered, shadows crawling up the walls, and for the first time, I realized that no matter how soft his voice, no matter how gentle his hands, I wasn't in a fairy tale. I was in a cage built by a man who could crush the world with a whisper, and he'd just promised to show me what that meant. I woke to light slicing through the curtains, pale and cold. For a heartbeat, I didn't know where I was. The sheets were too soft, the ceiling too high. Then the scent of cedar and smoke hit me, and it all came rushing back. The church, the blood, the mansion, the man. I sat up slowly. The fireplace had burned out, leaving only ash. The balcony doors stood cracked open, the wind curling in like a curious hand. Beyond it, the forest stretched into morning mist, endless and quiet. A knock at the door startled me. I didn't answer. The door opened anyway. The same woman from last night stepped inside, dressed this time in a gray dress that clung to her frame like armor. She carried no tray. "He wants you downstairs," she said. My stomach twisted. "For what?" "Breakfast." I hesitated. I didn't trust the word breakfast anymore. It sounded like a trap disguised as normalcy. The woman's gaze flicked to me, her voice still calm. "You should come. He doesn't like to wait," my heart thudded. I swung my legs off the bed, pulling on the clothes I'd left draped over the chair. My hands trembled as I smoothed my hair, but my face in the mirror was almost steady. Almost. I followed her through the corridors. In daylight, the mansion looked even bigger, endless hallways branching off like veins. The walls gleamed with muted gold, the windows so tall they framed the forest like paintings. Men in dark suits moved quietly along the halls, silent, efficient, eyes forward. No one looked at me, but I felt them notice. We descended a sweeping staircase into a room I hadn't seen before. It was some kind of dining hall, long and narrow, the walls lined with heavy tapestries. A table stretched down the center like a blade. At the far end sat Gabriel. He looked different in daylight, less like a monster from a nightmare, more like a king seated on a throne he'd carved himself. His dark hair was slicked back, his shirt crisp, the bandage under his shirt hidden but not forgotten. A silver ring glinted on his hand as he poured himself coffee. I froze at the edge of the room. "Come," he said without looking up. My feet carried me forward against my better judgment. I sat where the woman gestured, halfway down the table. Gabriel's gaze lifted to me as if we were the only two people in the room. "Eat," he said softly. I stared at the plate in front of me. Eggs, bread, fruit. Normal food. My stomach churned anyway. "You're quiet today," he said. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Maybe because I'm not used to waking up in someone else's house. His mouth curved faintly. "This isn't just a house. Then what is it?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "A fortress, a sanctuary, a kingdom. It's whatever it needs to be." I clenched my fork. "And what am I in this kingdom?" His eyes darkened. "You're here because you saved my life." I swallowed. "That's not an answer." He stood then, slow and deliberate, and walked toward me. Each step felt like a verdict. He stopped just behind my chair, his shadow falling over me. "You could have left me there to die," he said. "You didn't. That means something." I turned my head, his closeness burning against my skin. "What does it mean?" His fingers brushed the back of my chair. "It means you're not just a witness. You're part of this now." My pulse spiked. "I'm not part of anything." He crouched slightly, bringing his face level with mine. His voice dropped lower. "Then why didn't you run?" I stared at him, searching for an answer I didn't have. He straightened. "Eat," he said again and walked back to his seat. The tension in the room felt like it might shatter. Slowly, I forced myself to take a bite. The food was warm, but tasteless. When the meal ended, he rose without a word and gestured for me to follow. My legs felt wooden as I trailed him out of the hall, down another corridor, and into a wide room lined with windows. This was no ordinary room. Desks lined the walls, maps spread across tables, screens flickering with images of streets and faces. Men stood at attention when Gabriel entered. "This is my world," he said quietly, his voice for me alone. I scanned the room. His world looked like an operation center for a war, lines of red connected cities on a map. Photographs were pinned with notes scrawled in sharp handwriting. It smelled of paper, gun oil, and power. "What do you do here?" I whispered. He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "I keep the city alive." Alive. He stepped closer, pointing at a cluster of photos. "Do you know how fragile order is? How quickly it collapses? People think they're safe because of laws. They're wrong. They're safe because of fear." I shivered. "You sound like you're proud of that." He didn't blink. "I'm not proud. I'm necessary." I turned away from the maps, my chest tight. This was the man whose blood I had wiped off my hands, whose breathing I had steadied with my own. And here he was, ruling a world built on fear. Why show me this? I asked. Because you need to understand, he said simply. You saved my life. That life comes with a price. I spun back to face him. What price? His gaze held mine, steady, unflinching. You're here. That's the price. I took a step back. That's not a price. That's a sentence. For a heartbeat, something flickered in his eyes. Something softer, almost human. Then it was gone. Stay close to me, he said. Why? Because the only thing more dangerous than me is everything else. I swallowed hard. His voice carried no threat, just cold fact. The men in the room moved quietly, their eyes averted, but I felt the weight of their presence pressing down on me. This wasn't just a house. This wasn't just a man. This was a world. And I was standing in the middle of it like someone who'd walked into a lion's den with her hands open. Gabriel turned and gestured for me to follow him again. Come, there's more you need to see. I hesitated at the door, my pulse thudding in my throat. What if I don't want to see? I asked. He looked back at me. Then you'll stay blind. And he walked out, expecting me to follow. I did. Because some part of me knew that as long as I kept my eyes on him, I might just survive whatever waited in the shadows of his kingdom. The hallways seemed longer the farther I followed him. Morning light streamed through tall windows, but it didn't soften the atmosphere. It only exposed the steel beneath the luxury. Every man we passed lowered his head in silent deference. Every door opened before he reached it. Power wasn't spoken here. It was breathed, lived, enforced. Gabriel led me into another wing, quieter, heavier. The air felt charged, as though it remembered every secret whispered within its walls. He pushed open a door and gestured for me to enter. It wasn't another office. It was something darker. The room was stripped bare except for a table, 2 chairs, and a man already waiting inside. His wrists were bound, his face swollen from bruises. He spat blood onto the floor when he saw Gabriel. So this is the kingdom you wanted me to see, I whispered, my throat tight. Gabriel didn't answer. He crossed the room and sat across from the man, his movements calm, almost graceful. He poured himself a glass of water from a carafe on the table. The silence stretched like a blade between them. Finally, the man spoke. You're going to kill me anyway. Gabriel swirled the water in his glass, watching the ripples. That depends. On what? On whether you tell me the truth? The man laughed, a sound cracked with blood. What's the truth to a man like you? Gabriel leaned forward, his voice low, precise. The truth is the only thing keeping you breathing. The man's smirk faltered. His eyes darted to me for the first time, confusion flickering there. Who's she? Gabriel's gaze never left him. No one you need to think about. But I felt the weight of it, the way he dismissed me, the way he protected me in the same breath. My stomach twisted. The questions began. Gabriel asked about names, about shipments, about betrayal. His voice never rose, never broke rhythm. It was terrifying in its control. The man resisted, spat lies, tested his limits. Each time, Gabriel answered not with rage, but with silence that felt sharper than violence. When the man finally cracked, spilling confessions like broken glass across the table, Gabriel listened without expression. Then he stood, walked around the table, and whispered something in the man's ear I couldn't hear. The man sagged forward, trembling. Gabriel turned to Anton, who had appeared silently in the doorway. Take him downstairs. Anton moved like shadow. The man was gone before I blinked. The door closed, leaving me alone with Gabriel in the suffocating quiet. I wrapped my arms around myself. What happens downstairs? I asked. He studied me for a long moment. You don't want to know, but I already did. I knew without being told. Whatever happened downstairs wasn't clean. It wasn't merciful. You wanted me to see this, I said, my voice unsteady. Yes, why? Because you need to understand who I am. I shook my head. You're a monster. Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or regret, but it vanished as quickly as it came. I'm the reason men like him don't eat you alive, he said softly. I flinched. I don't need you to protect me. He stepped closer, his shadow falling over me. You think you don't, but you wouldn't last a day without someone like me. Anger surged hot in my chest. You don't get to decide that. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. And yet, here you are. I wanted to scream, to shove him, to claw my way back to the life I'd had before. But some part of me knew he was right. Terrifyingly right. I was already entangled, and no amount of denial would sever the thread. His voice dropped, quieter than the flicker of candlelight. Do you regret saving me? The question hit harder than any threat. I opened my mouth, closed it. My throat tightened. Did I regret it? My hand still remembered the heat of his blood, the weight of his body. I'd acted on instinct, compassion, humanity, but here, standing in the core of his world, I couldn't pretend it was simple anymore. I don't know, I whispered. Gabriel's gaze lingered on me, unreadable. Then he turned away. Come, there's more you should see. I followed, my legs trembling because what else could I do? He led me down another corridor to a wide balcony that overlooked the courtyard. Below, dozens of men moved in tight formations, training with weapons, sparring, moving like pieces on a board. Their discipline was sharp, military. But this wasn't an army that fought for flags or countries. It was an army that fought for him. "They serve me," Gabriel said, standing at my side. I hugged myself against the cold wind. "They fear you," he glanced at me. "Fear keeps men loyal. That's not loyalty. That's chains." He studied the men below, his profile carved in stone. "There's no difference." I stared at him, at the way he stood, calm, commanding, untouchable. And for the first time I realized how deep his solitude went. Surrounded by men, by power, by walls, yet utterly alone. "Why show me all this?" I asked again, softer this time. "Because if you're mine, you need to see what that means." My breath caught. His words burned through me like fire. I turned away, unable to hold his gaze. My heart hammered, torn between fear and something I couldn't name. The courtyard echoed with the sound of men striking, shouting, obeying. The world beyond the mansion was silent, but here, the storm lived and breathed, and I was standing at its eye, tethered to the man who had built it with his blood. I didn't know if I would survive it, but I knew I couldn't walk away anymore. That night the mansion didn't sleep. I could feel it, like a pulse running through the walls, a current humming under the floors. Men moved quietly outside my door, their voices hushed but urgent. The air smelled of rain again, heavy and electric. Something was coming. I sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the little black phone Anton had left for me. My fingers hovered over the button, but I didn't press it. If I called him, he'd come. But what would I even say? That I was scared? That I could feel the whole house holding its breath? A noise cracked the silence, a distant thud, then another. Not thunder, something else. I stood and crossed to the balcony. The forest below was a dark ocean, the trees shivering in the wind. Somewhere in that darkness, a sharp burst of light flared, then vanished. Gunfire. My stomach dropped. The door to my room burst open. Anton stepped inside, his face grim, a weapon already drawn. "Stay down," he snapped. "What's happening?" He didn't answer. He crossed to the balcony, scanning the grounds below. Another burst of gunfire echoed, closer this time. Anton pressed something to his ear, speaking low. "Move her, now." Before I could react, he was at my side, his grip iron around my arm. "We're going. Where?" "Safe room." I dug my heels in. "Where's Gabriel?" Anton's jaw clenched. "Downstairs." I pulled against his hold. "Then I'm not leaving." Anton's eyes flashed sharp and cold. "You think this is a game? He's out there bleeding because of you." My heart lurched. "Because of me? No time." He yanked me toward the door. We barely made it into the hall before another explosion rocked the house. Plaster rained from the ceiling. Men shouted below. Anton shoved me against the wall, his body shielding mine. "Stay behind me." I swallowed a scream, my pulse hammering. The mansion, which had felt like a fortress, suddenly felt like a coffin. We moved fast, down another corridor I hadn't seen before. My ears rang from distant blasts. Men in suits passed us, some bleeding, some dragging others. The smell of gunpowder and metal filled the air. Then I saw him. Gabriel appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by two men, his shirt ripped open at the shoulder, blood streaking his arm. His eyes locked on mine instantly, cutting through the chaos. "Get her out," he barked to Anton. Anton started to pull me away, but I wrenched free, running toward Gabriel before anyone could stop me. He caught me by the shoulders as soon as I reached him. His hands were slick with blood, but his grip was steady. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. I couldn't breathe. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His gaze burned into mine. "I told you to stay upstairs." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. I couldn't. For a heartbeat, something shifted in his face. A flicker of vulnerability, raw and unmasked. Then another gunshot cracked the air. One of his men went down. Gabriel shoved me behind him, drawing a weapon from his waistband in one fluid motion. He fired down the hall, the sound deafening. Anton grabbed me again. "Now!" Gabriel turned his head slightly, his voice a command even in chaos. "Get her to the vault." I reached for him, but Anton pulled me back. Gabriel's eyes met mine one last time before he turned back to the fight, his body moving like a blade. Precise and lethal, even bleeding. We ran. Anton half-dragged me through another door, down a narrow staircase lit only by emergency lights. My heart pounded against my ribs, my breath ragged. "This way," Anton said, his voice clipped. We emerged into a small underground hall lined with steel doors. At the end was one thicker than the rest. Anton punched a code into a panel and shoved me inside. The room was small, lined with reinforced walls, a single table and chairs inside. "A panic room. Stay here," Anton ordered. I grabbed his arm. "What's happening?" He hesitated, then spoke low. "Someone sold him out. They hit us from the outside." My blood ran cold. "Sold him out. Is he?" Anton's eyes hardened. "He's not dying tonight. But stay here." Then he was gone, the door sealing shut with a metallic hiss. I stood in the silence, my heart hammering. The walls vibrated faintly with distant gunfire. I paced the small space, my hands shaking. Images flickered in my mind. Gabriel crouched over the table in the interrogation room, his voice calm, his eyes cold. The courtyard, his men drilling like soldiers. His touch brushing hair from my face, soft as a whisper. And now, him bleeding, fighting, protecting. I sank to the floor, pressing my palms to my eyes. I'd told myself he was a monster, a king of fear, a man whose power came from chains. But in that hallway, with blood running down his arm and fire in his eyes, he hadn't looked like a monster. He'd looked human, mortal, breakable, and I realized with a jolt that scared me more than the gunfire outside. I didn't want him to die. I didn't even know why anymore. Minutes crawled like hours. Then the door hissed open again. I bolted upright. Gabriel stepped inside, his shirt torn, his arm still bleeding but his eyes clear. He shut the door behind him, the lock sliding into place. I stumbled toward him. "Are you—" He caught me before I could finish, his hands gripping my arms, steady but trembling slightly. "I'm fine," he said quietly. "You're bleeding. It's not mine." That was a lie. I could see the pain behind his eyes, but I didn't press it. He let go of me and leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. For a second he closed his eyes. The mask slipped, and I saw it, the weight, the exhaustion, the loneliness. He opened his eyes again, the steel sliding back into place. "We're clear for now," he said. I stared at him, my chest tight. "Someone betrayed you?" He didn't flinch. "Yes. Who?" He shook his head. "Doesn't matter yet. It matters to me." His eyes met mine, and for the first time there was no command in them, only something like wonder. "You're shaking," he said softly. "Of course I'm shaking. You're out there getting shot at while I'm locked in a box." He almost smiled, a small, strange curve of his lips. "You sound angry." "I am. Good. That means you're still alive." I swallowed hard, my throat thick. He reached out then, almost hesitantly, and brushed his thumb across my cheek. His hand was warm despite the blood. "I don't want you in this," he murmured. "Then let me go." His thumb stilled. "I can't. Why not?" "Because you're the only thing in this house that isn't built on fear." The words hit me like a blade slipped between my ribs. We stared at each other, the silence heavy with gunpowder and something else I couldn't name. For the first time, Gabriel didn't look untouchable. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, holding on by his fingernails, and for reasons I couldn't explain. I stepped closer. The silence after gunfire was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It pressed against the walls of the panic room, buzzing in my ears, a phantom echo of chaos still thrumming in the marrow of my bones. I stood frozen, inches from him, his hand still on my cheek, the heat of it anchoring me when everything else felt like smoke. Gabriel's eyes were darker in the dim light. They looked heavy, bruised with something deeper than exhaustion. He didn't move. Neither did I. For one suspended heartbeat, it felt as though the world outside had stopped. Then he dropped his hand. Just like that, the spell broke. "Sit," he said, voice rough, stripped of its usual command. I didn't. "You're bleeding. It'll wait." It won't. My hands shook, but I reached for him anyway, fingers brushing his arm where the torn fabric stuck to his skin. He flinched. Not from pain, but from the touch itself, like he wasn't used to it. Slowly, I peeled the shirt back. The wound wasn't superficial. A deep gash carved across his shoulder, blood seeping slow but steady. "Where's your first aid kit?" I asked. His brow arched faintly. "You think I stock this vault like an infirmary? Then tell me what's here." A flicker of amusement crossed his face, quick as lightning. He opened a small panel hidden in the wall and pulled out a metal case. Inside, gauze, antiseptic, bandages, precisely arranged, military neat. I exhaled. "Sit. Now." This time he obeyed. He lowered himself into the chair at the steel table, his body coiled tight, as though sitting still was the greatest risk he could take. I cleaned the wound with trembling hands. He didn't make a sound, didn't flinch as the antiseptic stung. His jaw was locked, his gaze pinned on me the whole time. "You've done this before," I murmured, not to myself. "Then who?" He didn't answer. The silence spoke for him. I wrapped the bandage around his shoulder, knotting it tight. My hands brushed his skin more than once. Warm, taut, scarred. Every scar I saw wasn't random. Each one told me what he would never say, that he bled often, that violence had been stitched into his skin like second nature. When I finished, I sat back, pulse racing, breath unsteady. "You should rest." He leaned back in the chair, watching me with that unnerving focus. "You look more shaken than me. I'm not the one bleeding. No, you're the one shaking like a leaf." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. My body still quivered from adrenaline. My stomach knotted with fear. But somewhere beneath the fear, something else stirred. Something heavier, more dangerous. "Who betrayed you?" I asked. His eyes sharpened. "Why do you care?" "Because if someone's trying to kill you, they're also trying to kill me." His lips curved, not into a smile, but something colder. "That's not why." I opened my mouth, then closed it. He was right. It wasn't just about survival anymore. I hated that he knew it. He stood suddenly, his shadow long across the floor. The room felt smaller with him moving. Too close. Too dangerous. He leaned against the table, inches away, his uninjured arm braced beside me. "You want to know who sold me out?" His voice was low, dark velvet wrapping steel. "It doesn't matter. Betrayal is a clock that never stops ticking. You just wait to hear it strike. Do you trust anyone?" He studied me, and for the first time, he didn't deflect. Not anymore. The honesty in his tone cut deeper than the wound in his shoulder. Then why keep them around? I whispered. Because enemies are predictable. His gaze didn't leave mine. Friends are not. Something in my chest twisted. I thought of the men who'd dragged me here, the soldiers who drilled in his courtyard, Anton who'd pulled me down the hall. To me, they were shadows. To him, they were pawns, replaceable, disposable. And yet, when I looked at him now, I didn't see a man surrounded by loyalty. I saw a man surrounded by walls. You're lonely, I said before I could stop myself. His expression flickered, quick and sharp. He leaned in closer, his face inches from mine. Careful, he murmured. You don't know what you're saying, but I did. I knew it in the way his hand had trembled against my cheek, in the way his eyes closed for a breath too long when he thought I wasn't watching. He wasn't just a monster. He was a man cracked through the center, and he hated that I could see it. My pulse thrashed in my throat. I don't think you're as untouchable as you want me to believe. He smiled then, not cruel, not cold, something smaller, sadder. You're braver than you look. Or stupider. Maybe both. The air between us tightened, pulled taut as wire. My hand, without thought, brushed his again. Heat shot up my arm, startling and electric. He didn't pull away. Gabriel, I whispered. His name felt strange on my tongue. Too intimate. Too real. His hand closed over mine slowly, deliberately. His grip was firm but not crushing. The first touch that wasn't a command, wasn't control. Just contact. You should be afraid of me, he said. But his voice cracked on the edges. I am, I whispered, but not enough to let go. The look in his eyes then. God, it wasn't power. It wasn't rage. It was hunger, yes. But more than that, desperation, as though no one had ever chosen to stay close to him when fear should have sent them running. For a moment, I thought he'd kiss me. The thought alone made my chest squeeze, my blood run hot. But instead, he let my hand go. He stepped back, the wall slamming down over his face again. We should stay here until morning, he said flatly. It's safer. The words were practical, sharp, a knife slicing through the tension. But his voice wasn't steady. Not completely. I sank into the chair, my body trembling with exhaustion, my mind a storm I couldn't escape. He moved to the far side of the room, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes closed. To anyone else, he would look untouched, composed, the king of this cage. But I'd seen the truth in the cracks, and the truth was dangerous, because I wanted to see more. Dawn arrived slow and gray, bleeding through the steel-reinforced windows. The panic room no longer felt like sanctuary. It felt like a cage in the belly of a beast. My body ached, my nerves raw, and yet sleep had evaded me entirely. Every shadow seemed alive, every creak of the mansion's frame a whisper of last night's chaos. Gabriel didn't speak, didn't stir. He stood by the wall, arms crossed, watching me as if I were part of the scenery, an object to be measured, weighed, understood. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but the words lodged in my throat. Finally, I asked, what happens now? He didn't answer immediately. His gaze slid past me toward the narrow hallway outside the room, where footsteps echoed faintly. Then he stepped closer, the movement quiet, predatory. We find the traitor, I swallowed. And then, he tilted his head, dark hair catching the pale light. Then we decide who lives and who dies. My stomach dropped. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But somewhere in the tension of that quiet, I realized I wouldn't. Not fully. Not yet. We left the panic room together, moving through corridors that smelled of gunpowder and fear. The mansion was waking slowly. Men emerged from rooms, eyes sharp, expressions guarded. Whispers circulated like smoke. I caught fragments. Attack last night. Traitor inside. He survived. The words were low, reverent, tinged with terror. Gabriel's presence commanded silence wherever he passed. His men fell into formation, eyes down, movements precise. I realized then that I had never seen the mansion truly alive before. Not like this, not in full daylight, when fear and loyalty were measured like currency. He led me into the courtyard. The morning light revealed the damage. Shattered glass, scorched stone, dents in the marble. Men were tending to others, some carrying the wounded to hidden chambers, others cleaning weapons with ritual precision. Gabriel didn't look at the destruction. He looked at his men. Who failed? His voice carried across the yard, low but lethal. A man stepped forward, tall, broad, scarred. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke. We don't know. Could have been inside, could have been out. We didn't see the attacker until he fired. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Someone sold me out. Find him, the man swallowed. Yes, sir. Gabriel turned his gaze on me then. His eyes softened ever so slightly. Not completely, but enough that I noticed. Stay close, he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My pulse pounded. I had been with him in the panic room, had seen the vulnerability he hid even from himself, and yet here he was, the storm incarnate, commanding his world like a king with fire in his veins. He led me into a building adjoining the courtyard. Inside, another set of men awaited. Gabriel's lieutenants. Maps were spread across tables, photos of men and places pinned carefully, connections traced in red ink. It was meticulous, cold, precise. He gestured for me to step closer. "Look," he said. I bent over the table, absorbing details I didn't fully understand. Shipments, locations, men assigned to surveillance, schedules, every line drawn, every name listed was a life under his control. "Why show me this?" I asked quietly. "Because if you're mine, you need to see what it takes to survive here." His eyes locked on mine. "And if you don't see, you won't survive." The words chilled me, but I didn't flinch. I was already learning that survival here wasn't just about hiding. It was about understanding the power he wielded, the meticulousness of it, and the danger of crossing him. A lieutenant entered, urgency written into every movement. Gabriel listened silently as the man spoke, nodded, gave a few sharp instructions, and dismissed him. Then he turned back to me, voice low, almost intimate. "You saw what I can do last night," he said, "and you saw what I could not prevent. You understand now that life and death hang by a thread here." I swallowed. "I understand." "No," he said sharply. "You think you do, but understanding is more than words. It's watching men who would kill for you, and men who would kill you, all in the same heartbeat. It's knowing that fear is stronger than loyalty sometimes." I nodded, my throat tight. He took a step closer, his voice softer. "And yet, I trust a few of them. I trust you. Don't make me regret that." The words sank into me. The moment felt too intimate, too sharp for the middle of a war council, but I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Gabriel's attention shifted abruptly, and I realized he'd already calculated something, some plan forming in that dark mind of his. "Find the traitor," he said again, his tone lethal. "And when you do," he didn't finish. I understood anyway. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. But instead, I stayed, watched him, learned from him, because I couldn't escape what I had become. A witness to a man shaped by violence. A girl entangled in a kingdom built of fear, blood, and steel. As we walked back toward the inner corridors, men falling in line around us, I realized something terrifying and undeniable. I was no longer outside his world. I was in it, and even as my pulse screamed, even as my mind searched for a way out, a part of me feared the thought of leaving, because I had glimpsed the man beneath the armor, and despite everything, I wanted to stay. The mansion had grown quieter by the time evening approached, but the tension was suffocating. Every corridor, every shadow seemed alive with suspicion. Men moved with a sharper edge to their steps, eyes darting toward one another as if betrayal might spill from a glance. I felt it too, the weight of unspoken accusations pressing down like a stone on my chest. Gabriel moved through it all like a predator among prey. His calm was a weapon, a presence that demanded attention. Even in the flickering torchlight of the main hall, he seemed untouchable. But I had seen the cracks. I had seen the wound in his shoulder, the subtle tremor in his hands when he thought no one was watching. He was a king, yes, but a king who bled, who worried, who needed me more than he would admit. "Stay close," he whispered as we entered the strategy room. The room was lit by a single overhead lamp. Maps of the city were spread across the table, red threads connecting faces, streets, and locations. Men circled around, quiet, tense, each waiting for the command that would cut through the fear like a blade. Gabriel gestured at the maps. "We've narrowed it down," he said. His tone was flat, unyielding. The leak came from inside. Someone with access. Someone we trusted. I traced a line of red ink with my finger without thinking. Each connection felt like a pulse of danger. "How do you know who it is?" He studied me for a fraction of a second. "Because mistakes leave traces." I swallowed hard. Mistakes leave traces. The words felt ominous, almost a warning. I realized then that living in his world wasn't about bravery. It was about calculation. Even I, untrained and terrified, was being drawn into that calculus. A man stepped forward, a lieutenant with scars across his knuckles. "We have a suspect," he said cautiously. "He's loyal, but—" Gabriel cut him off with a single look. "Bring him." I didn't need to see the man being led in to understand what would happen. His hands were bound. His eyes flicked to mine briefly, fear raw, unmasked. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to pretend I wasn't watching. Gabriel's eyes narrowed, scanning the room. He moved around the table like a chess master, positioning himself, calculating distance, dominance, power. The man's lips trembled. "You sold me out," Gabriel said finally. His voice was low, deliberate. "You endangered everyone under my protection. You endangered her." His gaze flicked to me. I flinched. The reminder that I was tied to him, that my life was part of this equation, made my stomach twist. The man's head bowed. I didn't mean... Didn't mean? Gabriel's eyes burned. Didn't mean to betray your life? Didn't mean to drag a woman into my chaos? I wanted to step back, to hide behind a pillar, but my legs refused. I was rooted, unable to look away from the man whose life depended on Gabriel's mercy, and from Gabriel himself, whose control wavered just enough to make him human. You think words will fix this? Gabriel said, circling him slowly. You think confession can undo the damage? The man shook violently. I didn't know. I swear I didn't. Gabriel's hand brushed the table, silencing everything. Then why did it happen? The man stuttered, no answer forthcoming. Gabriel's lips pressed into a thin line. The air trembled around him. I realized suddenly that he was balancing on the edge of two worlds, the monster who commands fear and the man who protects those he claims. And I was watching both sides. Do you understand loyalty? Gabriel asked. The man nodded frantically. Yes, sir. No, you don't, Gabriel interrupted, leaning closer. You understand obedience. You follow orders. You comply. But loyalty is something else. It's choice. It's blood. It's sacrifice. It's never half-assed. And you... He pointed directly at the man's chest. You have none of it. The man's body shook. Please let me live! Gabriel's gaze flicked to me. My chest tightened. His eyes softened ever so slightly, just for a fraction of a second. I realized that in his mind, I wasn't just a witness. I was proof, a measure of the human cost if failure continued. You watch, Gabriel said softly, almost to me. You understand the consequences of betrayal. I nodded, unable to speak. Then, with emotion so fluid it was almost imperceptible, Gabriel turned, motioning Anton forward. The man was escorted out of the room without another word. His life was not yet ended, but the fear would haunt him forever. That was the lesson Gabriel wanted me to see. When the door closed, Gabriel finally exhaled. His hand brushed a stray lock of hair from my face. Are you all right? I nodded, though my stomach still twisted with the intensity of what I had witnessed. I think so. He studied me for a long moment. Good. That's important. I looked at him, realizing with a jolt that my place here had shifted. I wasn't just a captive anymore. I wasn't just a witness. I was learning the rules of this world, the weight of power, the price of survival. Gabriel turned back to the maps, his mind already moving forward, already planning the next step in the hunt. I stayed silent, absorbing every detail, every nuance. I understood now that in this house, in his world, knowledge was as sharp as any weapon, and despite my fear, I also understood that my bond to him had changed. The fear of him no longer dominated entirely. Curiosity had begun to creep in. And worse, so had a flicker of something I didn't want to name. A sound outside drew our attention. A distant, hurried step, a whisper of movement. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Stay, he ordered. I obeyed, though my body ached with the need to move, to act, to do something other than wait. Gabriel moved to the doorway, glancing back at me once. This is only the beginning, he said. The words settled in my chest like iron. Only the beginning, and I realized, with a mixture of dread and something I would not admit even to myself, that I would follow him through whatever came next. Because in this house of shadows, of fear and power and betrayal, I had nowhere else to go. And for the first time, I didn't want to. The mansion had grown quieter again, but it was the quiet that felt dangerous, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Gabriel moved through the halls with a predator's grace, eyes scanning, calculating, always 3 steps ahead of the chaos he commanded. I followed silently, each heartbeat a drum in the tense air. The lieutenants gathered in the strategy room again, tension visible in their stiff postures. I stayed near the back, watching everything, absorbing every glance, every tremor of uncertainty. This was a world I hadn't asked to be part of, but I was here nonetheless, and there was no turning back. Gabriel gestured at the table. Someone betrayed us, he said, his voice low and steady. But I could feel the edge beneath it, the coldness that demanded obedience. And now we find him. A murmur ran through the room. Men exchanged glances, subtle and careful. No one spoke without permission. I realized how fragile loyalty was in this place, how quickly fear and suspicion could poison the strongest bonds. Bring him in, Gabriel ordered. A man was ushered forward, eyes down, shoulders tense. He was young, not more than 25, with a thin scar running along his jawline. His hands were bound in front of him. Gabriel circled him slowly, a shadow that swallowed the room. You betrayed me, he said, his tone almost conversational, yet the air vibrated with the threat beneath every word. The man's voice trembled. I didn't mean— Don't lie to me, Gabriel interrupted, stopping in front of him. I can hear the truth even when it's buried beneath layers of excuses. I stepped back instinctively. The man's eyes flicked to me briefly, pleading silently for help. But I couldn't. I was learning the rules, and one of them was this: intervention could cost you everything. Gabriel's gaze sharpened. Do you understand the consequences of betrayal? Yes, sir, the man stammered. Do you? Gabriel's voice dropped to a whisper, so quiet it carried more weight than any shout could. Do you understand that a single misstep could cost you your life and the lives of everyone you care about? The man nodded, swallowing hard. I do. Gabriel's hand flicked toward the table. Anton stepped forward, bringing a folder from the wall. Gabriel opened it and spread photographs across the surface. The man caught in small lies, missteps, contact with the enemy outside. The evidence was meticulous, undeniable. You thought you could hide it, Gabriel said. You thought I wouldn't see the pattern. I shivered. The precision of it, the way he had anticipated every lie, every misstep, it was terrifying. I had seen a man bleed, seen him fight, seen him command fear and respect, and yet this was something more. Ruthless, surgical, unforgiving. The man's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean— Gabriel leaned in close, his face inches from the man's. Meaning is irrelevant, he said, his voice ice. Intent does not undo the damage. He stood, circling back to the table. His hand hovered above the photographs. A silent executioner. I give you one chance to confess everything. Every secret, every contact, every plan you've shared. The man's voice broke. Yes, I'll tell you. Everything. Gabriel's eyes flicked to me, dark and unreadable. Watch carefully, he whispered. This is what happens to those who betray me. I couldn't tear my eyes away. My stomach churned with a mix of fear, fascination, and something I hadn't expected. Admiration for the sheer force of his mind. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't shout. The power radiated from him like a storm in calm form, contained, controlled, lethal. The man spilled every detail, trembling, confessing to every act of disloyalty. Gabriel listened, expression unreadable, noting every inconsistency, every truth, every fear. And then, when the confession ended, he leaned back. You will live, he said finally, the words almost a mercy. But remember this. Loyalty is not a choice once you are part of my world. You survive by serving, by obeying, by understanding that every misstep can be fatal. The man sagged in relief, trembling violently, a prisoner of gratitude and terror alike. Gabriel's eyes met mine again. Do you understand now what it takes to survive here? I nodded, though my throat was tight, my mind racing. I understood more than I wanted to admit. I understood the weight of power, the brutality required to maintain it, the fragility of trust, and the price of failure. He turned from the man, walking slowly toward the door. Let him go, he commanded Anton. The man was released, staggering back into the shadows, forever marked by the knowledge that Gabriel's mercy was as precise and terrifying as his wrath. Gabriel paused by the doorway. His gaze lingered on me, softening ever so slightly, though the hardness never left completely. You've seen it, he said. You've seen why I am as I am, and now you know what it means to be part of this world. I swallowed, heart hammering. Yes, he nodded, then added almost quietly, and why I cannot let you leave. The words settled over me like a weight. I didn't argue. I didn't run. I couldn't. Not after everything I had seen. Not after everything I had felt. Outside, the mansion was quiet again. But I knew it was the calm of a storm waiting to break, and I realized with a jolt that my life had irrevocably changed. I was no longer a visitor, a passive witness, or even a hostage. I was part of the machine, entwined in the pulse of power and fear, and tied to the man who ruled it with precision and ruthlessness. And worse, something in me didn't want to leave. Gabriel moved past me, his presence a shadow I couldn't escape. He didn't speak again, but I could feel the tension in the air, the charge of unspoken words and emotions restrained by control. His hand had brushed mine once, but that touch lingered in memory, electric and dangerous. The day stretched forward, filled with reports, calculations, and the subtle undercurrent of fear and loyalty. And through it all, I remained by his side, learning, watching, understanding, because I had no choice. And because deep down, I feared that I would never want one again. By evening, the mansion no longer felt safe. The sun had set behind heavy clouds, and shadows stretched across the halls like dark fingers. Every creak of the floorboards, every flicker of candlelight seemed amplified. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric, like static before a storm. Gabriel moved through it all like a shadow himself, silent, deliberate, every movement controlled. Even with the attack earlier, Even with blood still drying along his shoulder, he radiated calm, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the flicker in his dark eyes when men passed by too slowly or looked at him with too much fear. He was always calculating, always predicting, always one step ahead. Anton appeared at the doorway, urgency etched in every line of his face. "Sir," he said, voice low. "There's movement on the east wing. Could be another strike?" Gabriel's gaze sharpened. "Take her to the inner hall, now!" I grabbed his hand instinctively. "I'm not leaving you." He paused, dark eyes scanning mine. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly. "Then stay close," he said. The east wing was where the mansion was most vulnerable. I realized for the first time how truly massive it was, how labyrinthine, how dangerous. Anton guided us through hidden corridors, past staircases that descended into shadows, past doors I hadn't noticed before. The sound of distant shouting reached us, muffled but unmistakable. Then a gunshot rang out. Gabriel's hand tightened around mine. "Stay low," he whispered. We pressed ourselves against the wall as more shots rang, echoing down the hall like rolling thunder. Men appeared around corners, rushing past with weapons drawn, shouting orders that mixed with the chaos. The mansion, which had always seemed invincible, was suddenly a battlefield. We rounded a corner and Gabriel raised a hand. The hallway was clear, for now, but I could see the traces of an attack. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls, splintered wood littered the floor. I felt a chill run down my spine. "They're testing me," Gabriel muttered, more to himself than to me. "Someone wants to see if fear can break me." I swallowed hard, clutching his hand. "Will they?" He didn't answer immediately. His dark eyes scanned the shadows, calculating, measuring. "Not while I'm here," he said finally. The next moments were a blur of movement. Men appeared from hidden doorways, some brandishing weapons, others trying to flee. Gabriel moved like liquid, precise and deadly, disarming one, subduing another, all the while keeping me close. Every brush of his body against mine sent a shiver down my spine. Not just fear, but something else, something raw. A man lunged from the side, knife flashing. Gabriel caught his wrist mid-swing, twisted it with brutal precision, and sent him crashing into the wall. I pressed against him instinctively, heart hammering, feeling his strength radiate through me. "Are you hurt?" I whispered. "No," he said, voice clipped. But the faint twitch of pain along his shoulder betrayed him. We moved again, deeper into the mansion, until we reached a fortified room, a place even Anton had never entered with me. Gabriel closed the door, barring it with heavy locks. For a moment, the chaos outside seemed distant, almost unreal. I let out a shaky breath. Why is this happening again? Gabriel leaned against the wall, hand pressed to the side of his face, closing his eyes for a fleeting second. "Because someone underestimated me," he said softly. "And because betrayal is never finished until it's punished." I stepped closer, compelled by something I couldn't name. "And you, do you ever get tired?" He opened one eye, looking at me sharply. "Tired? Never, but..." He paused, the shadow of exhaustion flickering across his face. There are moments when even I wonder how much longer I can hold everything together. The admission struck me like a thunderclap. The invincible, untouchable man I had thought I knew was human, fragile, vulnerable. And yet, he didn't fall. He simply continued, moving through danger as though it were a dance he alone could perform. I found myself stepping closer, drawn to him, despite the chaos and the fear. "You don't have to do it alone," I whispered. His gaze softened, just a fraction, just enough that I caught the raw edge beneath his control. "And yet I do," he said. "Because if I falter, even for a moment, everything collapses." The words were heavy with truth. I realized in that instant how isolated he truly was, how much he carried on his own, and how much he had begun to trust me, not as a pawn, not as a hostage, but as someone he relied upon, even slightly, in the storm that surrounded him. Suddenly, another series of gunshots shattered the brief quiet. The attack had resumed, relentless and precise. Gabriel's head snapped up, his eyes sharp, calculating. "Stay behind me," he ordered. I did instinctively, pressed against his back as he moved with deadly precision toward the source of the shots. Every step was measured, every move decisive. The chaos of the mansion outside the fortified room was reflected in his every motion. Controlled, lethal, unstoppable. And yet, I realized that beneath the armor, beneath the discipline, I had seen glimpses of the man he could be without the mask, the man who bled, who cared, who allowed someone to see the cracks. The thought made my chest tighten. Gunfire continued outside. Men shouting, running, chaos everywhere. And still, Gabriel's focus never wavered. He was power incarnate, yet human. Invincible, yet vulnerable. Dangerous, yet compelling. I clutched his arm instinctively, my body pressed close to his. For the first time, fear mingled with something else, something fierce, something raw, something that made my pulse hammer even harder than the gunfire around us. He glanced at me, eyes dark, unreadable, but in them there was a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent promise, a bond forged in blood and fire. We stood together in that room, the world outside a battlefield, and I realized with a jolt that I would follow him through whatever came next, because the mansion, the chaos, the violence, it didn't scare me as much as losing him ever could. And in that moment, I understood that I had become part of his world in a way I could never leave, and a way I secretly didn't want to. The dawn arrived pale and muted, brushing the mansion with gray light that felt almost mournful. The chaos of the night had subsided, leaving only the echoes of gunfire, the scorch of shattered walls, and the lingering metallic scent of blood. The halls were silent now, but the tension that had gripped the mansion like a living thing hadn't dissipated. Gabriel moved ahead of me, silent, alert, a shadow in the dim light. His shoulder was still wrapped in a bandage, but he moved with the fluid, lethal grace I had come to recognize. I followed closely, my pulse a steady drumbeat of fear and anticipation. Today we would find the final piece, the traitors' allies, the ones who had orchestrated the attacks, and I feared what that would bring. The main hall was empty, but the air was heavy. Every footstep echoed like a warning. Gabriel paused, eyes narrowing at the far end of the room, where movement flickered like a shadow dancing across the walls. "They're here," he muttered. I pressed close to him instinctively, heart hammering. "Are you sure?" He didn't answer. He never did in moments like this. He simply moved forward, every muscle coiled, every sense alert. I could feel his presence as a tangible thing, powerful, magnetic, and terrifying all at once. From the shadows, men stepped into the light. 3 of them, armed, tense, faces grim. Their eyes flicked to Gabriel, and I saw the flicker of recognition, respect, fear, and the faintest trace of doubt. Gabriel didn't flinch. "You made a mistake," he said quietly. "You underestimated what happens when loyalty is broken." One of the men raised his weapon. The motion was fast, desperate. Gabriel moved faster. In a blur of motion, he disarmed him, twisted the arm behind his back, and sent him crashing into the marble floor. The other 2 faltered, hesitation spreading across their faces like a virus. I realized then, as I watched him, that this was a man who could bend chaos to his will, who could command fear and respect with a single look. And yet, beneath that power, beneath that lethal precision, I knew he was human. I had seen the vulnerability in him, the moments when the armor slipped and something raw shone through. The remaining men lunged, but Gabriel was already moving, a shadow among shadows. Weapons dropped, bodies went down, and in minutes, it was over. The silence that followed was absolute, punctuated only by the shallow breaths of the surviving men. Gabriel straightened, scanning the room. "The traitors' allies are gone," he said finally. "And the one who started this," his gaze shifted toward me, dark and unreadable, "will be found soon." I swallowed, my chest tight. "And then justice is served," he said simply. The words were cold, but I could feel the weight behind them. Justice in his world was not gentle. It was precise, unyielding, and final. He moved toward me then, closing the distance, his eyes scanning my face as if reading my very soul. "You stayed," he said. "I did," I whispered. His hand brushed mine, warm, deliberate. The touch lingered longer than necessary, and I felt a shiver run through me. "You shouldn't have," he said softly, almost a warning. "I wanted to," I said, my voice steady despite the fear curling in my stomach, even knowing what it means. His gaze darkened, and for a moment, the monster and the man were one in his eyes. He leaned closer, voice low and husky. "You've seen what it takes to survive here. You've seen me bleed, you've seen me fight, and yet you stayed." I swallowed, heart hammering, because I didn't want to leave. He studied me, and the tension in the room shifted, like a storm ready to break. His hand moved to my cheek again, fingers brushing lightly. "Then you understand," he said. "You understand what it means to belong here. To belong to me." The words hit me with the force of a revelation. Belonging. The idea terrified me, and yet deep in my chest it resonated. I had feared him, hated him, and yet something had grown, a bond forged in fire, in fear, in the shared danger that had shaped us both. Gabriel's eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. No one else can see this. No one else can know this bond, he said quietly. Because if they do, it will be used against us. Against you. Against me. I understand, I whispered. He nodded, then stepped back slightly. Then accept it, he said. Accept that this is who we are, and what we must do to survive. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time, I saw no mask, no shadow, no command. Just him. Just the man who had collapsed outside the church. Who had been vulnerable, who had fought, who had bled, and who had chosen me in his own way as something worth protecting. I accept, I said finally. My voice trembling but resolute. A faint smile touched his lips. A rare, fleeting thing that seemed almost impossible against the backdrop of his power. Good, he said softly. Because nothing will ever be the same after this. Outside, the first light of a new day broke over the mansion, illuminating the damage, the scars, and the remnants of the night's chaos. Inside, a different kind of light shone between us. Tense, fragile, yet undeniable. Gabriel's hand brushed mine once more, lingering just long enough to make my pulse spike. You stayed, he repeated, and I won't let you go. I don't want you to, I whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. A promise, a confession, a surrender to something neither of us could name fully. But we didn't need words. The bond was clear, solidified by fire, blood, and survival. Outside, the world remained dangerous, unpredictable, and ruthless. But inside the mansion, in the quiet aftermath of chaos, we had found something neither of us expected, a fragile, perilous connection that had survived fire, betrayal, and blood. Gabriel turned toward the windows, eyes scanning the horizon. There will be more attacks, he said finally. More tests, more betrayal. I pressed closer to him instinctively. Then we'll face them, I said. His dark eyes flicked to mine, a mixture of acknowledgement, warning, and something softer. Almost human. Together, he said. I nodded, and for the first time, I understood the weight of those words. Together. In a world built of fear, power, and violence, it was the only choice that mattered, and so we stood, side by side in the ruins of what had been, ready to face whatever came next. The mansion, the power, the danger, they were all part of him, and now, inextricably, part of me. I had found him collapsed outside the church. He had made me his bride as repayment, and in that bond, forged in fire and blood, I had found a place I couldn't and wouldn't leave. Because in surviving him, and with him, I had found a truth more dangerous, more terrifying, and more real than anything I had ever known. We belonged to each other, and nothing would ever be the same again.